Thanks for joining the Joss and Crowd podcast, where we talk about photography, business, life, and a little bit more. Hello, how are you?
I am fine. How are you?
I'm good. I am trying to stay warm on this very cold day.
I feel that.
I question constantly why I live in a giant softbox. As a photographer, we love this life, but I do not love the weather.
No, standing out at the bus stop in the morning with my son, I was like, okay, it used to be fun, and now it's just cold.
Yeah, I'm sure those bus seats, as soon as you said bus stop, I'm like, oh, those are always so cold.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And according to my son, the bus is also stinky.
Oh, I'm sure. I do not miss those days at all, for sure.
No, me neither.
So I'm excited to have you on today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started. And
yeah, so my name's Brittany Bowman, and I'm the owner of Clutter HQ. And really, I got started because my marriage was falling apart because I was stressed out all the time and overcommitted, and I had too much ish in my house and too much on my plate, too much on my mind. And I just went on this ruthless mission to simplify my life. And after I realized how simple it can be to simplify, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to show people. There's so many stressed out people, especially us women out there. Like, I was just like, all right, I want to share my message with people. So I've had a ton of fun helping other people do the same thing. The work feels a little hard at first, but it's so worth it, and it gets so much easier. And it feels fantastic when you have simplified to the point where you can actually sit and breathe and enjoy your life.
so did it save your marriage?
It did save my marriage. Yeah. So I remember having this conversation with my husband, and he's such a nice man, one of the nicest human beings. And I just remember thinking, I am doing such a disservice to him because I'm stressed out all the time, and it's self-inflicted, right? I don't have to live this way, but I'm choosing to, and it's impacting him. And I remember looking at him, and I was like, I know that something has to change or we're not going to make it. And he said, I agree. And that was kind of like the catalyst to get my ish together, right? It was no turning back at that point. So I just started simplifying, and it was like all this weight just started to lift off of me. And it almost felt like I got back to that point of the butterflies in my stomach when we first started dating. It's like we just started connecting again, and I was showing up as a better mom, and I was showing up stronger in all areas of my life, which is a bit counterintuitive if you think about it. You're taking on all of these commitments, and you're kind of halfway showing up for everything. And then once you start to simplify, everything starts to fall into place, and you really feel like you're putting your best foot forward, which was a huge change for me.
So where did you end up having to start when you started this whole project?
I really started with my physical stuff in the house. I just always remember, I felt like I was cleaning all of the time, every single day, but my house was really never put together. It still felt stressful and heavy. So why am I putting all this effort into my home if the end result is still not where I want it to be? And it's just exhausting, right? So I started with my physical stuff, and in particular, my clothing, because in my mind, I was thinking, okay, this is something that only I can do, right? My husband cannot declutter my clothes, and my kids cannot declutter my clothes. So I started there, and it just started snowballing into everything. It became almost a game of, okay, how simple can I make this? And it's beautiful. I've got all these routines in the house that are not these heavy routines and systems that I put in the place. They just make sense for us. And so I've really just started to lean into these natural systems and routines that make our life easy. And getting rid of the physical stuff really helped me see, like actually visually see what this simplified life could bring for our marriage and for our family.
I feel like it's also such a weird momentum when you start decluttering things, how like weight goes away that makes you feel like I don't really know the term of it, but you just kind of feel a little less boggled down, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like for me, the word that always pops up is freedom. Like I feel free. I feel free. Yesterday I had house guests that wanted to like pop by randomly, and they were like, hey, do you mind if we stop by? Old Brittany would have been in full on panic mode. And this Brittany was like, yeah, I'll be home at 7:30 if you want to come at 7:30. And they were here at like 7:32, right? And old Brittany would have been severely panicking, calling my husband like, hey, could you clean the kitchen? Like I just would have been flipping out over it. And now I'm like, yeah, I'll see you in a few minutes. It feels so free. Like I get to just do what I want to do, and I'm not hindered by my home.
One of my friends was talking about how her family is so stressed out. I know that this recording's happening in the future, but Thanksgiving is coming up while we're recording this, and they're stressed out completely because they have family coming in, and they're like, the whole house is a mess, and I got to deep clean, and I got to clean out all this. And it just, I felt bad for them, because it was like, that's not what the holiday is about. Like it should be being around friends and family, and not having to stress about that like a whole week in advance. I know that I definitely have went on adventures of decluttering myself. So I've been there. I'm not at the level you are, but I definitely inspired to be that way. I try to stay organized because I feel like my life flows better. But years ago, I went on this whole, like, I'm going to change my life in 6 months. And I moved, I ended up finding a place to live. I wanted to lose a lot of weight. I actually had a goal of 100 pounds, and I did it all. And it was so weird, like going through my clothes, I was like, that doesn't fit. Why do I have it? Get rid of it. Like, I don't want to wear that. I don't want to be this size. Get rid of it. And then I like things that I didn't want to take when I moved, I got rid of it. And like a weight, totally, like you said, like it felt like a freedom. It felt like everything was just kind of happening fast and in a good way. I lost 100 pounds in a year. I moved into a place, like there was a lot of other things that had like compiled in it or whatever, but I just felt like I was getting rid of just heaviness and that boggled down weight of having things that I didn't need in my own life, and that things that didn't serve me a purpose. In 2020, I started reading a book, I think it's called How to Become a Minimalist. And it was very fascinating. I, of course, did not agree without getting rid of your photographs. That is something that I will never agree with. In the whole chapter, he has like a thing about like scanning your photos and putting them into digital folders. I don't support that message. The photographer of 22 years, I'll never support that message. But there was just so many fascinating things that I tried it. And he pretty much, like, the one thing I took away from it, like, if we create space, we give ourselves a space to put more things in, and we have to stop saying that. So what was something that you saw that you learned the most, that you're like, oh my God, I didn't even realize we were doing that?
One thing that was huge for me was that I realized that clutter attracts other clutter, and I had never really thought about it, but this is kind of funny. We had house guests a while back, and I was a psychology major, and I'm all about like research and how the brain works and stuff, so it's very common for me to run my own little experiments.
Nice.
But we had some house guests. I'm like, I wonder if I clear off all of the countertops and like have literally nothing on them, I wonder if they will also not put anything on the counter. And they had stayed with us before, and it got like, I don't want this to sound mean. It just got really messy. There were like so many people in the house, right? And it was not stressful. It was just, there was just stuff everywhere. And my family's not used to that. So my my kids were like, Mommy, there's stuff everywhere. You know, it was like kind of funny actually. But so I ran this experiment. I had everything cleared off the counter, and I kid you not, there was like every single night there was nothing left on the counter. And I was like, oh my goodness, clutter literally attracts other clutter, because you walk in the door and your kitchen table is right there, or whatever surface, and you've got all this stuff in your hands and you just set it down, right? And then you maybe walk by that same space and you got a couple other things in your hands. Well, you might as well just put it there, because you've already got a mess there anyways that you need to figure out. But then if there's nothing on that surface, your brain really will be like, oh, maybe we shouldn't set it there, and you'll go put it away. Obviously not 100% of the time, but it was just so exciting for me. I'm like, this is huge, because if you can keep one countertop clean, then you can move on to the next countertop or the next surface. And it was kind of empowering for me of how easy it is, because you can do it in stages too. Like, you don't have to have your entire home decluttered today. You can do this in stages and make massive progress. So that was one thing that was really cool for me to learn. And I would say the other thing that was pretty powerful was just understanding that there is a new version of me, and I get to release the old version of me and everything that supported her. So my house now supports the needs of my family today, not all of this stuff that I've wished I would have been or wanted to be or used to be. I just feel like we keep things because it feels a little wasteful if we get rid of them, or it doesn't quite make sense to get rid of them in the moment. But then when you really evaluate it, it was probably serving a purpose for an old version of you and not the version today. So like really being honed in on who you are today and who the people are living in your house are today is so powerful. And it becomes easier and easier to release that stuff that you've held on to that you don't need to.
I see it often too, like my family, they're not hoarders by any means, but they hold on to things. And I have said so many times, I'm like, why do you still have this? And they're like, I paid a lot of money for it. And I'm like, but you're not using it anymore. Like, give it to somebody else that they can use it, or sell it. And they're like, I might need it. What is something that you suggest when somebody has like a block like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's so common too. One of the biggest things that I hear people say is that, why I paid money for that, or I could make money off of that. So I just try to get people to be super logical about like, okay, that money is spent. So like, we absolutely cannot take that into account at this point, because yes, it was expensive, but that's not putting money in your pocket today. Like, you holding on to it is not affecting your bank account. In fact, it's depleting your energy, because it's one more thing sucking up your space and sucking up your time, because you're having to think about it, right? Like, we're having a conversation about something that you don't need, but you're afraid to let go because you spent money on it. But us sitting here talking about it isn't making you money, and it's not releasing any of that energy that needs to be released for you to really focus in your home. So I try to get people to just realize like the money is spent, and okay, let's say we can make $50 off of this item today, then freaking sell it today. Let's do it. If it's not serving you and you can make $50 off of it, sell it. And what I typically do in all my programs, I have people set rules for themselves. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. But for me personally, if I can make $50 off of an item within 48 hours, I will put it on Facebook Marketplace to sell. If it's going to be less than $50, like, I'm not going to message somebody back and forth over an item that's $10. And if somebody else's threshold is $10, that's cool. Like, whatever it is for you, that's great. But for me, it felt like making an extra $50 feels good, but sitting on my phone, texting back and forth, trying to coordinate pickup times over a $10 item does not feel good to me. So I have people say, like, I have them set their rule, like, what's your monetary amount? So if you can make $50 off of one item, and then what's your time frame? Like, if you put it on Facebook Marketplace and it doesn't sell for 3 days, don't even waste your time lowering the price, going through the DMs again. Like at that point, that item is still taking away from you. It's still depleting you. Right.
And I feel like at certain points, you're going to just be like, oh, I'll just keep it. Like you talk yourself back into keeping that item.
100%. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. I've done it over the years of like, oh, I want to sell that. Well, it didn't sell. I'll just hold on to it. Somebody will want it. Or I want to give that to somebody really special, like things like that we tell ourselves that it doesn't really matter at the end of the day.
So do you feel, this is going to come from a personal experience, do you feel like there are certain things that it's okay to keep, such as arts and crafts?
Absolutely. And truly, I tell people, I don't have to come into your house and it feel good for me. It needs to feel good for you. So as long as it's supporting the person you are today, that's amazing. Like me, I have a ridiculous amount of gnomes. I just love gnomes.
My sister does too. I love it.
And I'm like, if someone is bothered by the plethora of gnomes in my home, that's on them. I don't care. But I really do think that we get to have things around us that bring us happiness and don't weigh us down. So like if you're mega into arts and crafts, do you. And the other thing I do say though, for people to kind of help police yourself on making sure it doesn't create a problem, is just to create like some sort of container rule for yourself. So for me, I have a thing with shampoo. It just is what it is. And I've tried to talk myself out of it and be different over the years. I'm like, I'm just going to embrace the fact that I love having a ton of shampoo for some reason. And I'm going to roll with it because it's apparently who I am. And, but all my shampoo has to fit inside of this like one container. And once I have too much, like if I'm going to spill out of that container, then I'm not going to buy anymore. So I might be able to fit like 5 bottles in there. No, I don't need more than 5 bottles of shampoo, but it allows me to just be who I am, which is apparently a girl who loves shampoo, you know? So, or I love trying different types of shampoo. So I really do encourage people to use that like kind of container rule. Like, okay, this is kind of my free for all area. I can do whatever I want with it, but it cannot come outside of this basket.
I really like that. I have a ton of arts and crafts. Like I was like, my first vivid memory, I was 5 and I carried a briefcase around of just craft paper and pencils, and that just spilled onto all of the things. And I have a vision of having a house with a whole entire arts and craft room and it be like super organized. But it's so hard because I feel like every person that I know that are crafters, we don't get rid of the fabric, we don't get rid of the paper, we don't get rid of the pen because we know we can use it.
Yeah.
But sometimes I start feeling guilty because I went through and got rid of so much stuff. And I'm like, but you haven't got rid of all of this. And then I'm like, I ended up selling, like once upon a time I was engaged and we never got married, but I did all of our wedding invitations and I hand embossed them all. And a couple of years ago, I got rid of like all of the embossing stuff. I still used it, but I was like, maybe it's like negative or like, and I got rid of it. And I still constantly am like, I wish I could emboss my Christmas cards this year. And I think like it's a hard line to have a good mindset. And I feel like sometimes we feel like we have to get rid of everything to be organized. But I have to remind myself like, well, I've organized this room. I've organized my bedroom. I've organized my kitchen. Like sometimes that might need to be enough and try to not take on the entire house. I have an apartment, but I know that like I have a couple of friends that they try to do the whole house and then they don't end up doing anything at all. So do you think that there's like a timeline that people should give themselves where they need to like break it down so that they don't get overwhelmed? I feel like a lot of times my own experience that people that have a lot of stuff are generally overwhelmed anyway, and their stuff gets them overwhelmed. So what is something that you would suggest that they can do to break that down a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question, because when you look at your entire picture, it can feel so overwhelming, especially if people have a lot of stuff in their basements or attics or a storage unit, like that feels heavy. So I tell people just to keep your first effort like just super small. And that might just be going through your socks, like seriously. It might be just going through one bathroom drawer. So what I've learned is that the motivation actually comes after you start taking action. It's not like, oh, I'm so motivated to declutter. No one is excited. I would be shocked if anyone was excited to know that they were going to spend like the next 30 days in the trenches in their house getting rid of stuff. Like that's not very exciting for people, but the end result is exciting. So when you start small, you start with just a junk drawer, just a bathroom drawer, just your socks, then that you see that's visual evidence that what you're doing is working and that it's bringing you peace. And then it starts to snowball from there. So I don't have a specific timeline where I think everyone should have their stuff done, but I will say, I think it is entirely possible to have your entire home decluttered in 3 weeks to 6 weeks. Like, I think you can that's absolutely attainable. You might have to work a little harder than you want to up front, but the end result is going to make you feel incredible. And there was something you said that reminded me too. What was it? Oh, I know what it was. You were talking about your craft room, like you still feel like or your arts and crafts supplies, you still feel like you have a lot of stuff. And so I just tell people to like really dig into how they're feeling, because I might walk into your craft room and be like, oh, this doesn't feel like a lot at all. Or I might be like, whoa, this feels like a ton. But it doesn't matter what it feels like for me. If you walk into that space and it feels heavy at all, like if you at all are getting this like icky vibe, then you know something is not in alignment with what you want. And so some people are incredible with maintaining massive amounts of stuff in a very organized manner. That person is not me. I need more minimalism in my home to be able to keep things organized. So I think there's really like a sweet spot for everyone on how much, and also does it serve your hobby, right? So like you're a photographer, if you have a lot of photography supplies, that's one thing. But if you have a lot of roofing supplies, obviously that wouldn't be in alignment with who you are today. So just really like honing in on what's actually serving you and how it feels. Like really do a temperature check on how you're feeling when you see that room or when you see that space.
So another question, do you see like do any of your clients ever have emotional attachments to things that are sentimental from like loved ones that have passed away or from their kids? I feel like a lot of times parents keep a lot of their kids' stuff. Yeah. How do you overcome stuff like that? Especially, I don't have a lot of things, but like I had a dog that passed away and I have a bin of her toys, and I'm like, at what point do I need to get rid of these? Or like, I don't want to. So like I when I boxed them up, I made sure it was, like you said, in a bin. But is there a time and a place of how much stuff is too much of someone that has passed on? Or
I tell people to focus on quality over quantity, and that was something that really I lost. Well, actually, between my husband and I, we lost 4 grandparents in 2018, so it was a year of shedding. Awesome. Yeah, it was a lot. Like so much was ending in our life, and we had all these new beginnings. And so anyways, in particular with both of my grandmothers, I was really focusing on the quality of what I was keeping. So I had like a handful of things that just brought up these beautiful, beautiful memories of my grandmothers. And so I held on to those items. And a couple of them were also practical items, like a blanket. And it's like something that I genuinely enjoy using on a daily basis. So you can think about practicality, the quality of the item, but then also the types of memories that are coming up. And this one is huge. I think that when we lose someone, our natural instinct is to kind of like hoard everything from them because that was a part of them and we don't want to let that go, right?
Yeah.
But then when you really dig into it on an individual item basis, you'll start to realize that some of those items are actually not bringing up great memories. Yes, it might get you to think of that person, but you might be thinking of that person laying in a hospital bed, or you might be thinking of that person being at that person's funeral. And that's not a cozy memory. So I really focused more so on what specific memory this was bringing up for me. And if it was a really happy one, then it could get to stay. But like, there was a dress that I had that I loved the way it looked on my body, but I was wearing it the day that my grandmother passed away. And so that's all I thought about every time I saw that in my closet. So even though I loved that dress, I got rid of it because the emotional tie to it was actually negative. So I also want people to make those items work for them. So like, my grandmother loved roosters, and we always kind of joked about like her kitchen was all done up in roosters, and like it was just funny as a kid because like, who loves roosters that much? But that it was like, oh, this really endearing characteristic of my grandmother. So I had this she had like a sugar tub or whatever that was ceramic, and it had some roosters on it. So I put that in my bathroom drawer, and I keep my makeup brushes in it and so it sounds almost silly, but there's also in my makeup drawer this little tiny casserole dish that I got at Target for like $1 in the little dollar section.
Yeah.
But I got it because my husband's grandmother was lactose intolerant. So anytime I made a dish, I would make her like a little separate one in her little tiny casserole dish. And I put that in my bathroom too, because now in the mornings when I get ready, I'm like getting ready with my grandma's, right? Like with my husband's grandma. It's like I get to remember these sweet moments while I'm getting ready in the morning. And so I really like that. To me, the quality of that is huge. I love it. But then if I look elsewhere, I might be thinking of like the stress of having to clean out their houses and just things like that. So really focusing on what's actually coming up for me.
You made like two really good points. The outfits. I remember when my grandfather passed away, we had to go get like outfits or whatever for the funeral because it was going to be cold and rainy and I didn't have anything. And I literally was like, I don't want to spend a lot of money on this outfit because I'm never going to wear it again. And everybody was like chaotic. It was just a crazy time. And they're like, why would you not wear it again? I'm like, because I'm never going to wear this outfit again and not think of burying my grandfather, who was such a staple in my life. Like that wasn't what I wanted. And I didn't. Like, I made sure that I can still remember the outfit vividly, and it was a very cute outfit, and it never saw the light of day again. And I had to get rid of it because I knew I would not. And like you said too, like seeing your stuff every day, I think that's such an important thing that I think people forget. And I know that I do it too, is like, what is it serving a purpose if it's sitting in a box and you're not seeing it every day? Like, that is not helping you, and it's not helping keep that memory alive, and they would want you to use it. My grandfather and my grandmother on my other side of the family passed away within a very short time of each other. And my parents had to go through all of their houses, and they still have a lot of, totally calling them out. My mom would be like, Jocelyn, but they kept so many things because my dad lost his mother when he was young, early 20s. I never got to meet her, but he kept all of her stuff because when he knew he wanted to show it to his kids, when he got married, his wife, and he has, but like, I don't have any emotional ties to those things. There were things that I wanted to keep, like I did a newspaper article of when my grandparents got married, like they made their announcement, because if they had never got married, I would not be here, like just that chain of command. But I feel like they held on to a lot of things because they wanted to keep that memory alive. And I try to tell them sometimes, like, that's not keeping them alive. The stories you're telling us are keeping them alive, and you're not using it. And my mom ended up, she kind of started giving us stuff, like me and my sisters, of things that she wanted us to have now. She's like, I don't want you to enjoy this just because I've died. I want you to enjoy it now. Like, I want to see you enjoy it now. Like, she had wedding bands she gave to me and my, she's only been married once to my dad. Like, they're still married, but she had like a set of 3 wedding bands that was engraved, and she was going to give them to us in her will and everything. She's like, I would rather you girls enjoy that now. And so now, like, she just has a little ring that she wears, but it's cool that like I get to enjoy that every time I put it on and I think of her. And I've seen that becoming more of a thing where people are giving away their stuff because they don't want to just hold on to it, and then they can share that story. But you don't have to like eliminate your entire life if it holds a meaning to you. I think was what I think is cool about what you do, because I think a lot of times people get overwhelmed because they don't want to get rid of everything. They think a dumpster is going to show up and they're going to just clear out everything and they have to make a decision. And that's not how you run it.
Yeah, no, I really hold a lot of space for my clients because I know it's going to be emotional, and like I will never ever tell someone to get rid of something that they're not ready to get rid of. I will ask the questions that I feel like I should ask to get you to think about things a little bit differently and see if you're ready. But if you're not, like, I'm not pushing. And I loved what you said about like having things out and using them, because yes, I very strongly believe that our belongings are not meant to be boxed up and sitting in a basement or an attic somewhere. They are meant to be used. And if we're not using them, they get to find a new home, whether that be someone else's home or simply a landfill. And I know it can feel wasteful, but in reality, literally everything we make on this earth is going to end up in a landfill at some point. And sometimes we just need to rip off the Band-Aid because it's taking up our space, it's taking up our mental space, and it's just easier just to let it go now versus later. But and then what you said that your mom was doing, there is a kind of a movement out there called Swedish death cleaning, and that's basically what it is getting rid of stuff before you die. That way people can enjoy it and you can experience them enjoying it also. And then when you do pass away, they don't have this negative emotion tied to that item. Instead, it's a very beautiful, powerful one.
My mom, with her rings, she had them engraved. So my parents, I think they've been married for 48 years. So I think it was their 40th wedding anniversary. They went and got, like, my mom likes jewelry. I'll just be the first to admit that. But she went and was like, it's time for new bands or whatever. And she had them engraved, and it was like with the intent of giving them to us. But it was something along the lines like, will always love you. And she had it on each ring so she could give each ring, and then me to find a message and then me to tell my sisters that I'm the youngest. So she was like, yeah, once you said it back to me, doesn't sound warm and fuzzy. And I'm like, no, but now I know that it's fun because like I have that. But I think that was such a learning moment for me, because I think sometimes we hold on to things, and I don't need to get all emotional about it, but like I had a hope chest of things that I wanted for when I had kids, and I lost my ability to have kids, and I held on to them for 6 years. It was very hard to get rid of things, but I sat with it for a minute and I listened to the music box, and I listed them for sale so that they could go to a new home. And as some of the stuff I gave away to people that I knew that had friends that they needed things for and stuff. And I don't miss having that stuff. Like, I think about it, but sometimes we have to let go of that to like open up space for different things. It's a weird thing how I get into it, and I'm sure you've experienced it, where I feel like I just get stuck on things. Like my own life feels like I have bottlenecks and I just feel overwhelmed, and I can rearrange my furniture, or I can just redecorate or move things around, and it creates a whole new movement and a whole new energy. And then I feel like more things come into my life. And I look back at my childhood and I was constantly moving things around. It was like, oh, it's a new month. Let's rearrange things. I have rearranged my photography studio so much. And I was thinking about it the other day. I haven't touched it in a year. Like I used to paint like every 6 months, and I haven't touched it in a year. And I was like, okay, you said a year, it's a year now. Like, how are you going to rearrange it? Because I just want to create that new energy. And what, like with you, you said you started in your own life. How do you organize your business, or not? I mean, that's a very big question, but like, how do you incorporate it with other things and not just your home environment?
It really, for me, and it has taken some time to get there, but for me, it's simply about a gut check now. Like, I know instantly when something feels out of alignment. I know, like, if a friendship starts to feel heavy, maybe we need to have a clearing conversation. Maybe we need to not be friends anymore. Maybe it's not serving either one of us. Or if I look at my calendar for the week and I get that feeling of like overwhelm or feeling a little resentful or frustrated or something, then okay, I know that I put too much stuff on my plate this week, and I get to simplify there. So for me now, it's simply about that gut feeling of like, anytime something starts to feel icky, I address it. And instead of old Brittany would have just been like, well, this is my life. It's stressful, but it doesn't have to be. And yeah, you know, we all have our own crap that we go through. So I can't say that your life should never be stressful, but really just like paying attention to your intuition and that gut feeling. And if things are feeling out of alignment, just tackle it. Make one little tweak. And I'll tell you one thing that it's like so ridiculously simple, but it was a game changer for me, is that when I would walk in my bedroom, there was always this one spot in the bedroom that drove me a little batty, because I always had my dirty clothes laying there. And sometimes it was like dirty clothes that maybe weren't super dirty or weren't really that dirty. I just didn't hang them back up, you know. So instead,
tried it on once and you didn't like how it looks, so you threw it in the laundry basket.
Exactly.
Like that.
Exactly. So instead of continuing to walk in my room and be irritated, I had this light bulb moment. It's so silly. I was like, I should just put a laundry basket there. And so I put a laundry basket there, and now I actually throw my dirty clothes in it. And so they're where they should be. But before, I was telling myself I was lazy. I was telling myself I couldn't keep a clean house because I had that pile of clothes in the corner, when in reality, I just needed to move the hamper. Yeah. You know, so it's like these little shifts where you just make like one teeny tiny tweak and it changes everything. So just, I really do also tell people to start to get curious instead of being judgmental. And I mean that about yourself. Like, me telling myself I'm lazy did not fix anything. It just made me feel worse. And I'm not a lazy person. I just didn't have my hamper in the right spot that supported my habits.
Right.
So I really do tell people, like, stop telling yourself that you're wrong for all of these habits that you have, and instead make your space work for you instead of trying to change everything about yourself.
Did you have any type of help when you were going through things? Like, did you bring in your husband and your kids, or was there any type of outsource help that you got that was in this process when you started?
I would say the vast majority of the home I've done on my own. But that being said, the first day that we started, I told my husband what I wanted to do. And I'm like, I really think that this is going to help our marriage if the house is just super simplified. So we pulled every single clothing item we had, and I put all of my clothes in the floor and he put all of his clothes on the bed. And we just stood there. We were going through things one by one. And honestly, that right there made me feel more connected to him. That one task where we were tackling a project together that we felt would help our marriage we did it together, and we're standing there and he's like holding up these hideous shirts and we're laughing about them and saying like, that is so hideous looking, like obviously donate that or trash it. No one's going to even want that. It was just funny. And it was lighthearted, even though we were going through tons of ish. So he helped with that. And the garage is really his domain. So actually, I think people would be surprised if they came to my garage. It does not look like super neat and tidy. It just doesn't. My kids have all of their like outdoor toys out there. My husband, that's just his domain, right? Like he's got his big lawnmowers and a boat and like all of this stuff out there. I'm like, I've just washed my hands of it and it doesn't stress me out, because that space is not for me. It is for my kids and it's for my husband, and it works for them. So he does do a good job of keeping it mostly tidy, but it's tidy to his level of expectation and not mine. And I'm okay with that. I've released that like controlling feeling. Yeah.
I feel like not everybody that has a game plan of going in and be like, I'm going to organize my life, I'm going to organize my thing. Not everybody in their family cell is going to be supportive or on board. Do you think that they should still try to get them to do it, or should they just do what they can with their things and then hope that the other people in the house join into that?
Yeah, I definitely tell everyone to start with your own stuff. Like we can't force somebody to get there mentally. They just have to see the results, and hopefully they will want to join in. And I will say most of the time, in fact, I would say 100% of the time for myself. I'm sure it's not 100% of the time for everyone out there, but 100% of the time for my clients in particular, over time, the other people in the house, they're like, oh, this is kind of cool. Or like I was said before, clutter attracts clutter. So when you're seeing less and less clutter around and things start to feel lighter and more open and the energy in the home's kind of renewed, then people start to get that decluttering bug and they're like, oh, I'll get rid of stuff too. So I've never had a situation in which the other partner in the home wasn't at least somewhat on board, but I do know a lot of people are very resistant to that. And so that's why I say focus on your own things, because like the people in your house are not going to be upset that you're decluttering your own clothing unless they share that clothing with you. But so really focusing on yourself and just letting them see the results and see what it feels like, really like feel the feels. And then they can understand it. And it's not something that you're forcing them to do or nagging them to do, right? You're kind of like, I like the hands-off approach, like, hey, I'm going to do me, I'm going to get rid of these things. And now it can create a struggle when it starts to spill into like the kitchen, everybody's using those things. So when it comes to more of the community areas, I do advise people to start to tackle those second. Like you don't probably want to start in the kitchen if you have someone in your home that's super resistant to getting rid of things, because they really need to like work on their own mindset. And they probably have some emotional trauma that they need to work through too.
I have somebody that's at my studio at the door. 1 second.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I'll have to edit this out or just run with it because that's life, but I have like by appointment on my front door, and she was driving by and was like, oh, photography studio, and had a question or whatever. And I was trying to like pretend like I wasn't here to not answer, but my whole door is glass. So I had to.
Hey, I totally get it. You got to do what you got to do.
You got to roll with the punches. That's funny. So I apologize about that.
Okay.
So do you end up working with a lot of people that are just regular everyday people, or do you focus on businesses, or like who are somebody that you love helping the most?
I really enjoy helping just the average woman who is feeling super overwhelmed. And I have noticed more recently, I have ADHD, and I have noticed more recently that a lot of the clients that I vibe with really well also have ADHD. So that's been a really cool realization for me. So I Typically the women who come to me are feeling a lot of pressure, whether it be internally or maybe someone else in the home, that like everybody's at their breaking point and they're like, we just can't live like this anymore. And so when somebody reaches out to me with that kind of energy, I'm like, all right, let's get to work. Let's fix you up. So I really love just helping the average woman.
It's funny you mentioned ADHD. We had a podcast, I think it was last week that aired, but it's a few episodes, and it was all about ADHD. And one of the things that I learned, I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but it wouldn't surprise me if I had it. But people with ADHD love piles.
Yes.
It's like literally a thing. Like, and it's a comfort to have those piles. Like, is that something where you would say, like, you're going to have these piles, just put it in a bin?
Yeah. We actually call them doom boxes, because you put everything in a box with the intention of like, oh, I don't really know where it goes, but I'm going to figure it out. And you never do, because your brain is overwhelmed. And your brain couldn't process it the first time around. So it's probably not going to process it the second time around either. But, and also we have to have visual cues. Like our brains literally are wired not to remember things. So we have to have this visual stimulation to remind us of things. So I've started to use it more as a superpower than like I at first I was a little resentful, like, oh, if my brain was just normal, I could like do these things that other people do, but like that's not my reality. So I just get to embrace it and make it a superpower. So I actually bought like a little table in our entryway, and that's for everything school related. So my son comes home from school and he puts his book bag on it. Now it is out in the house, and it's probably not like the most visually appealing decoration, but it reminds me in the morning that I have to make sure my son gets up for school, or like my brain will not remember anything unless I have some sort of visual cue for it. So I also have some hanging file folders there where his homework goes. So instead of his homework being tucked away somewhere, I see that folder. I see like just the tip top of the paper, and even just the color of the paper will remind me, oh, that's the yellow paper. I know yellow stuff is due on Friday. So it's like little things like that, little tricks like that with your ADHD mind that you can put in place that actually end up working really well. But before, you were just super overwhelmed because you had piles of stuff everywhere. But now you can have intentional piles, and it makes a big difference.
I think that you just nailed that. Is like sometimes we have to work, like you have to work with what we have instead of trying to change it. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. Like you have to do what works for you. Do you think that people have a hard time struggling to get help because they get to a level where they feel that they're really embarrassed about their life?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had several people, specifically in like the in-home sessions that I do, that as soon as I walked in the door, I could tell they were not comfortable with me being there, which it hurt my heart a little bit, because I was there to help them and I really didn't want them to carry that shame and guilt. But also I understand that that's just something that they get to work through, and they don't have to feel that shame and guilt forever, and I get to help them work through it. So yeah, I think people reach a point where they are so overwhelmed that they need help, but then they are so embarrassed they don't want to ask for help. Yeah. And I would say to anyone feeling that way, please know there are a lot of people out there who are not going to judge you, and in fact they're going to give you the biggest hug and let you know that it's totally fine and it's totally fixable.
Yeah. There was a quote that was on one of my friends' Facebook the end of the year, beginning of the year, whatever, and it was essentially, you can't win alone. And I've tried to hold that with me all year, because I'm in my 39th year of life, and I could probably count on one hand how many times I've asked for help. And it is a huge problem for me, because I don't like depending on people. I've gotten disappointed when I did ask for help. And so I'm trying to get to a point that, like, maybe if I do ask for help and they say no, that somebody else will help me. And I think that that's important to be reminded, that just because somebody else might have thought that their house was a mess, or like they judge them doesn't mean that somebody else won't judge them. I have a thing too, that if I have a sink dishes, it comes up on a lot of my podcasts as I joke about it, but I always feel like if my dishes are out of whack, and like I've gotten to a point before where I've literally thrown my dishes away and just was like, these aren't serving. They were from my when I got engaged, I had them as like a wedding gift or so whatever. I eventually, like, I hated doing dishes, so I threw them away and it got a little bit easier. But I always feel like there's triggers that I know, like, okay, when my dishes are out of, or I'm not staying on top of them, or I'm not finding the joy to put in them away, or like, I know it's like we do the whole step. It's like we do the laundry, but don't put it away, or we do the dishes, we don't put them away. That I have to kind of reevaluate my life. Do you follow up with people, and like once you've set up, do you come and check on them and say, hey, like your life is getting out of control again? Are you just like a one and done, or is there like, do you carry on the project?
I definitely check in on people because I really, and honestly, it might be kind of just for me. I'm a words of affirmation girl. So like if somebody says, hey, my house is still amazing, it will like give me energy for weeks. But no, I do check on people because I so deeply care about I care about anyone out there who's struggling and feeling overwhelmed because of their stuff. Like it breaks my heart to know that people are sitting in their homes every single day, completely miserable in a fixable situation. And so I definitely check up on people. And if sometimes they'll say like, well, I love this, but like, this isn't necessarily working for me. And then we just make a little tweak and move on. And sometimes it just takes that like outside person to kind of think about things differently. When we're in our own home and in our own routines and we're kind of on autopilot, our brains are actually wired to set things on autopilot. So like, you get up and you brush your teeth every morning. That's probably an autopilot thing. Your brain you're not consciously saying like, oh, I have to brush my teeth. It's not this big task you have to do, right? It's on autopilot. You just go do it. So our brains are literally wired to do that. So you really have to step out of that mode, that autopilot mode, and really sink in and think about how you're feeling and what small tweak you can make to feel even just a little bit better. Because if you feel a little bit better today, then you can feel even better tomorrow.
And I think that those are things like that fall into your day-to-day, like your work life or your business or your kids' life. And you're also setting examples for your kids on how to do things like, so I think that's pretty awesome that you do all of this. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today? I feel like we covered a lot of topics.
We have covered a lot of topics. No, the only thing that I want to say to people is that if this at all is resonating with you and you feel heavy and weighed down by your things, just go do one small thing today. Tackle one small thing that's going to make your life easier. And that could simply just be cleaning out your refrigerator. Right? Like something super small that's going to lift a little bit of that weight, because it is so possible. And you are absolutely capable of these teeny tiny projects. If you look at the whole house, you're going to be overwhelmed, but you tackle that one tiny thing. And after you do that, you're going to feel motivated to do more, but you just got to like rip off the Band-Aid and do the one thing.
I had a friend recently, like they cleaned out their car. They spent a lot of time in their car. They cleaned out their car. And then the next thing I know, they were telling me that they were cleaning out their kitchen. And then when they got out of their kitchen, there was their dining room. And you don't have to have a lot of stuff either to like, it can be minimal things and then it just kind of gets out of control. So I think it's awesome what you do. And I know that you're helping a lot of people and hopefully you keep helping a ton more. How can people find you?
So you can find me at clutterhq.com and you can send me an email at hello@clutterhq.com and it's me. I'll respond.
Perfect. I'll also put all your links in the show notes so people can follow you. Thanks so much for being here today. And I hope people have learned a lot and that they know that they can go and clean. I have a list of things in my head now. I'm like, yep, I need to clutter out that and I need to clean that. So it's motivated me and reminded me to go do some things, even if it's just one thing, because like you said, we create these lists of things and we're like, oh, I got to do all of it. And then you don't have to do all of it. You just have to start at one place and then knock it out. And I think too, people don't realize that it's not always time consuming either. Like you might think that it's a whole day's project, but you can get it done in an hour, especially if you open up that drawer and you're like 99% of the things can be thrown away, or the fridge, like everything's expired, toss it. Like,
yeah. I do say, I'm like, set an alarm for 15 minutes and see what you can get done and focus on the things that you can get rid of, right? Like don't focus on necessarily organizing, but just focusing on clearing and getting that out. And then it's like less stuff that you have to think about in the long run. So yeah, you can get a ton done in a short amount of time.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
Well, that's all we have for today's podcast. We thank you so much for joining, and I hope that you have a fantastic day, and we will catch you next time with the Joss and Crowd podcast.